The Mumbai air hung heavy and humid. The station bustled, a symphony of chaos. Joseph and Rosie hurried through the crowds, their faces etched with worry. They had missed their train to Nashik. A vital meeting awaited them. Joseph hailed a taxi. Hope flickered in the darkness. "Nashik?" he asked the driver. The driver, a gaunt figure with eyes like embers, nodded. "I'll take you. Long drive, night journey." Rosie felt a shiver down her spine. She didn't like the look of him. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "We have no choice," Joseph said, his voice tight. Rosie reluctantly agreed. The taxi pulled away into the night. The city lights blurred into streaks of color. Rosie felt a growing unease. The driver rarely spoke. He hummed a tuneless melody under his breath. It set Rosie on edge. She glanced at Joseph, seeking reassurance. He seemed lost in thought. "Do you ever feel like," Rosie began, her voice barely a whisper, "like something bad is going to happen?" Joseph patted her hand. "Don't worry," he said. "We'll be in Nashik soon." But his words held no comfort. Rosie's fear continued to grow. The car sped on, swallowing the miles. Hours melted away. The landscape outside the window transformed. Gone were the city lights, replaced by dense, looming trees. The driver turned off the main road, taking a detour. Rosie's unease intensified. "Where are you taking us?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Shortcut," the driver grunted, his eyes fixed on the road. The car bumped and rattled along the uneven path. The forest pressed in on either side, a wall of shadows. Rosie dozed off, exhaustion claiming her. Her sleep was filled with unsettling dreams. She woke with a start. The car was parked on a deserted stretch of road. A lone figure stood by the roadside. A woman, shrouded in a shawl, her face obscured. Rosie's breath caught in her throat. "Who's that?" she whispered, her heart pounding. "No one," the driver said, his voice strangely calm. "Just stopped for tea." But there was no tea stall in sight. The rest of the journey passed in tense silence. Rosie couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. The car finally rolled to a stop in front of a faded hotel. "Nashik," the driver announced. Rosie felt a surge of relief tinged with apprehension. She stepped out of the car, her legs shaky. The hotel was eerily quiet. Dust motes danced in the dim light that spilled from a single bulb. Joseph seemed unaffected by the strange atmosphere. He was already talking to the drowsy receptionist. Rosie felt a chill run down her spine. Something wasn't right. She followed Joseph to their room. He flung open the door and stepped inside. Rosie hesitated. The air felt thick, heavy with an unknown presence. She entered the room, her senses on high alert. The door slammed shut behind her. Rosie jumped, her heart pounding. She turned to face the room. It was then that she noticed the mirror. Her reflection stared back at her, but something was different. Her eyes were circled with shadows, her skin unnaturally pale. And there on her neck were two small red marks. "Joseph," Rosie whispered, her voice trembling. He stood by the window, fully dressed. "You're ready?" she asked, confused. "I thought you were asleep." Joseph turned, a strange smile playing on his lips. "Oh, I've been awake for a while," he said, his voice oddly flat. Suddenly there was a cold breath on her neck. Rosie turned to face the source. It was the woman from the road. Her eyes glowed with an eerie light. Before Rosie could scream, the woman lunged. Her teeth sank into Rosie's neck. A searing pain shot through Rosie's body. She tried to fight back, but the woman was too strong. Rosie felt a strange numbness spreading through her limbs. The woman pulled away, her lips stained with blood. Rosie slumped to the floor, her vision fading. The last thing she saw was the woman's triumphant smile. When the hotel staff finally broke down the door, they were greeted by a scene of unimaginable horror. Joseph lay dead on the floor, drained of all blood, and Rosie was gone, vanished. The only trace of her was a single blood-stained shoe. The driver was never found. Some say he was in league with the mysterious woman. Others whispered of ancient curses and creatures of the night. Whatever the truth, one thing was clear: Rosie and Joseph's journey had led them straight into a nightmare, a chilling reminder that sometimes the road less traveled is best left untraveled, and that trust, like a fragile thread, can snap in the darkness.